So, Jackson, I wanted to kind of shift gears and talk about Detroit today. We put together a top five power rankings of Detroit area schools. And mind you, I said Detroit area because not all of them are in the city of Detroit. However, one of them is a short walk from Ford Field. And I mean a walk from Ford Field. It's a almost annual tradition for that school. But let's get into some of our Detroit-based schools. Jackson, first off, I want to start off with a ringer. Okay, this is a team that is going to be in contention to win a state title year in and year out. And I know this because they won it last year, and they won it in a laugher. Detroit Catholic Central, the Shamrocks, the first team that I'm thinking about on this list. 14-0 last year. Division 1 state champions. Again, it wasn't really even much of a game. You know, the kids say they Lil Broed Cass Tech, and they did 42-19 in that matchup. And there's a few players that I'm really looking at coming into this season in particular. First of all, we have to start with number 1. Duke Banta is back again. Imagine, Jackson, your junior year going undefeated and winning a state championship, but you still have one more year. That's the beauty of having your star quarterback back if you're Detroit Catholic Central. They're good on their offensive line. Eric Anderson's another name that I think of. He's a big physical presence that'll certainly make an impact at the next level. I also think of Gideon Gash. I mean, where can this kid not play? He's versatile. He's all over the field. Maybe some questions in terms of turnover for Detroit CC. We won't know the answer to those until we get to week 1. It's really where you figure out those types of things. But Detroit Catholic Central, number 1 on this list. Jackson, I mean, any takes, anything you see from this team coming into this year?
I mean, how can you not favor these guys as winning another state championship? They fell short 2 years ago to Cass Tech, came back last year, like you said, absolutely annihilated the competition. This is the year Central goes back to back in Division 1 as state champions, right? And they don't do it without dropping a single game either. And with that, I mean, if they do that, it'll boast the single scoring defense in Michigan history as well, right? So this is a team that, I mean, they bring a lot of crowd too. I mean, their crowd in itself. I mean, you said it right down the road. I did not realize that until I went to Ford Field last year to cover Unity Christian, and I drove by their stadium. I go, whoa, that feels like home field advantage. And then you hear later that night, or later that weekend, rather, you're like over 10,000 fans show up to Ford Field, making that place look more packed than a 2008 Detroit Lions game, like that is insane. So yeah, they're going back to back this year, and there's no doubt about that.
That's not even really a hot take, in my opinion. I think you're right. And the only reason I say it's not hot is because I agree with you. I'm sure there are people out there that are like, wait a minute. It's not easy to go undefeated and win every single game and win a championship. But if you're Detroit CC, it's natural to think that may be the case. Number 2 on this list, I talked about the guys who, again, it is almost an annual tradition that they walk to Ford Field. Some people come from miles away. I think about Menominee, Michigan. They're essentially going through Wisconsin, 3 states to get to Michigan, let alone just to get to the city of Detroit, or they have to go through the entire UP. I don't know, you choose, right? And more than likely, it's going to be on a yellow school bus of some sort because they're just dogs like that. But Detroit Cass Tech, which Jackson, I remember my sophomore year at Grand Rapids West Catholic. We went to a state championship. We were playing after Cass Tech played their game, and we're walking out to the field, right, through the tunnel to get ready for warm-ups, and we're walking down as they're coming off, right, already a head and shoulders taller than everyone on our side. And I saw Donovan Peoples-Jones walk off at the same time I was going on, and he was like tapping helmets on his way off as if we were the youth team playing during the halftime show. These are some monsters. They are very good. They do have a history. That is Detroit Cass Tech and the Technicians. There's a few different players that really stand out to me. I think CJ Sadler, one of the top ranked players in Michigan high school football. No surprise there. You think about Donald Tabron, the second, who's back for another year. He was just a sophomore last year. I remember watching a sophomore Bryce Underwood go up against Caledonia once upon a time, but I don't know. Would you rather play Caledonia or Detroit Catholic Central? No offense to my Caledonia friends out there. Little bit of a different test. So does he take that next step this year? They got plenty of depth. They got plenty of players. Jackson, they got 16 Division One prospects on this team. They may as well compete in the Mid-American Conference at this point. What do you see out of Castech?
I mean, that's always a good question. You're like, do you think these guys can compete against a MAC team? It's kind of like when you think about 2019 LSU, could they compete against the Cleveland Browns? I think Tay Brown the second throws for over 3,500 yards. CJ Sadler continues to establish his name on the map, puts a 25 total touchdowns, maybe a little bit more as Cass Tech. I mean, turn the tables and win the D1 state title at Ford Field. I'm thinking there's a rematch in our future between Cass Tech, third year in a row. What do we think? A little Alabama Georgia type of situation here. I think Cass Tech comes through, and I think they make it closer than what it was last year. I think that's a certain.
It's one of those historic, well, not historic, actually. It's one of those rivalries that's born of relevancy, not necessarily because of history, but also consider the other angle to it, right? It is the epitome in so many ways of public versus private. It's Division One, major Division One, Detroit CC against Detroit Caz Tech, two of the most historic programs in Michigan high school football history. Both of them may be representing something a little bit different. So that's what makes this matchup so exciting and why I wouldn't mind seeing it again in the finals this year. Orchard Lake St. Mary's. I hate that I have a history against this team. And I say I have a history. Anybody that I went to high school with has a history with this team because we had the brilliant, wonderful idea at Grand Rapids West Catholic of, hey, let's play Orchard Lake St. Mary's to open the year for 2 straight years. That is, and for small colleges, when Akron goes to play Florida, you know why they're going there, right? They're going there because they get a paycheck, right? There's something there. They're going to come away with something, right? If it's not a win, it's going to be a bag. That's why those two teams are playing. And I don't know how it works out in high school. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think it's more you want to expose your players to better talent. Well, yeah, when they have Allen Robinson on their team, yes, okay, you know exactly what you're getting into. They're a nightmare to play against, but 12-2 last year. They were back in the Division II state championship last year. They ended up winning that. I think of, a Jabin Gonzalez, one of the state's most precise quarterbacks. His arm is lethal, coming off a junior campaign in which he orchestrated an offense over 37 points last year. That's about as lethal as you get in the state of Michigan. Chad Willis at wide receiver has been electric. What do you see out of Orchard Lake? Because I know they're capable of winning another one, but do they have the pieces to do so again? What is your takeaway from OLSM?
I absolutely think so, because I think on the other side, you got a team coming from the west side of Michigan, too. And not to say anything bad about our west siders here, but I mean, there's a clear cut difference in athleticism between both sides of the state. I think OLSM competes the three-peat this year, right? They win every single playoff game by a lot, and that's kind of a tough crowd. After a couple weeks ago, I'm calling my shot with Byron Center finally winning their conference over Muskegon, because last year that's what it was. Byron Center played them close, but unfortunately it's hard to beat teams like Orchard Lake St. Mary's, and they just produce an insane amount of collegiate talent on so many different levels. I mean, we're both in the baseball world. I covered collegiate baseball in the summer for many, many years. So many of our key pieces to those teams every summer were from St. Mary's, right? So many of them go out to the big leagues, and even that in the NFL or into these big college programs. So it's hard to compete with programs like this, especially when they've got to establish at so many different sports.
Yeah, and I mean, they probably could. Allen Robinson on the base paths is terrifying as well. It's fun to say that you played against those guys, but it's not fun in the moment for many a reason. So for those of you who never had the pleasure of playing Orchard Lake St. Mary's, consider yourself lucky. Let's march on to the next team, Detroit Martin Luther King. Detroit MLK. There's a team last year that was young and learned a lot of lessons, but you get the feeling that there is a tidal wave coming when it comes to MLK. They got big game experience, and that is the most crucial thing. And this is why we'll see coaches oftentimes sprinkle in underclassmen, sophomores, juniors into positions that are critical because they need that game experience going into their senior campaign. That's the only way that you end up going out and winning big games. So when I think of MLK, Jameer Henry is back, big physical interior lineman, 6'5", 327. How do you not eat up blocks at that size? I think of Don Spillers the third, wide receiver. He's listed as an athlete, right? So this is someone that you can plug and play. So you talk about the beauty of availability. Well, he has all of that. A lot of really good pieces. You think about their secondary is also very strong too. They have a lot to them. Looking at MLK, this is a team that I think they could surprise a lot of people. What do you see from MLK this year?
No, this Detroit Martin Luther King Jr. team. I mean, this is a team that, yes, they're D3, but they play against so many schools that are consistently playing for a state championship, right? Like you got teams at the D2 level, the D1 level, right? You look at the schedule last year, and they had two losses that were one possession, but otherwise their other two losses were against Cass Tech and Catholic Central, right? And then unfortunately they just ran into a Warren De La Salle, which shout out Casey Wyla, the athletic director there, former pitching coach there for the Traverse City Pit Spinners. But they ran into a school that just snuck their way into the playoffs and were hot in the playoffs, and they made a run, right? So you're not going to get that every year. This is a year you get back to the basics, right? You win those one possession games, right? And then you take things back from Cass Tech. And I think that's exactly what they're going to be looking to do this year. And they're going to run to the table all the way back to the D3 state championship game.
A couple of West Side connections on this final one on our top 5 list, the power rankings over in the Detroit area. First of all, shout out my man, Casey Wyla, that is up there, the athletic director at De La Salle. Hey, man, we go back to 2020 in Traverse City when I was broadcasting for two teams that played 46 combined times against one another in one summer. Yes, his brother actually allowed me to live in his apartment in Traverse City for $500 a month. Yeah, that was a dream. So appreciate the Wyla family. Casey, what's going on? Also, Dan Roan, their head coach, who used to be the head coach at Grand Rapids West Catholic. I still have trouble looking him in his eyes. He just has that intimidation factor about him. I don't really know what it is. But his son Gabe, I worked with him for a long time, so obviously I know the Roan family. But let's get into De La Salle. I don't think a top 5 list in the Detroit area is ever complete without Warren De La Salle. I think they deserve a spot in there every single year. I remember the last playoff game I broadcasted was them in Birmingham Groves, and it was over by the time the first quarter wrapped up, essentially. Very good, very deep. Maybe some concerns. I know they had some injury issues. I look at their defensive line that's really stout. Anthony Cartwright the third is back, the tight end. He can certainly make some catches. I think of their linebacking core, which has some depth pieces back. They're looking stronger. I think if they can maybe answer some questions defensively, this is a team that could very well be back and winning another state championship. What do you see out of the Pilots in 2026?
Yes, the Pilots. Yeah. I mean, this is a team that had a little bit of a weird off year, right? They lost quite a few games by quite a bit last year, but they were also 2 wins away from having a winning season, right? In the regular season, that is. So this is a team, again, like I just said, they got hot, right? And they really blew out quite a bit of teams in those first 3 rounds of the playoffs until they were met with DeWitt there in that semifinal. But this is a De La Salle team that they're going to lead the entire metro area in turnover margin. I mean, this is they have one of the better defenses in the state. They will record a takeaway in every regular season game. That is something that, they like to strive themselves on. So I think they get back to their winning ways. And I think last year was just kind of a dud, but even with a dud regular season, they came away with some hardware at the end of it all. So can you even really call it a dud if you're winning a district championship and a regional championship? But yeah, De La Salle, they're on their way back up. That's for sure.